Tonight, President Trump is charging ahead with tariffs and deportations. We've got Congressman Pete Sessions of Texas here to discuss. He's the co-chairman of the DOGE Caucus. He's from a border state, and he has a lot to say about trade. That's going to be a very important discussion. Also, Devon Archer has been granted a pardon from President Trump. He'll join us with his reaction. Plus, Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. has opened a vaccine injury division at HHS. Dr. Stella Emanuel will be back on the program to break it all down. And egg prices have finally gone down. We've got a supply chain expert with us to explain how it happened. We're on assignment here in the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. We've got those stories and more all next on the Matt Gaetz Show. Let's do this.
We're shaking up Washington, D.C. We're breaking the fever.
You ever watch this guy on television? It's like a machine. He's great. Matt Gaetz.
This week, in just days, several significant tariff measures initiated by President Donald Trump are set to take effect, impacting various sectors of the U.S. economy and our relationships with other countries. Trump has been clear America will no longer be taken advantage of in a trading system that for too often has put foreign interests above the interests of American workers. On April 3rd, a 25% tariff on imported automobiles and parts will be implemented. President Trump wants more Americans actually purchasing American-made vehicles to bolster this sector of the economy and to increase domestic productivity. There are some industry experts, however, that warn these tariffs could increase car prices, but that would be temporary in exchange for a more resilient, productive American automotive sector, something that has always been a hallmark of the American economy when we've been at our best. By Wednesday, President Trump plans to announce additional tariffs targeting all U.S. trading partners. Reciprocal trade. These measures are intended to be actually more favorable than the existing tariffs imposed by other nations on us, on our workers, on our economy. Now, this path to reciprocal trade might not be without some turbulence, but the way Americans have been treated, this is the only way to durability and sustainability. Then there's the dynamic with Russia. President Trump has threatened to impose secondary tariffs of 25% to 50% on all buyers of Russian oil if Moscow is perceived to be obstructing the efforts to end the conflict in Ukraine. All reports indicate President Trump is a little ticked off at Putin for not leaping to the ceasefire that could have created more opportunities for peace. Now, despite these threats, oil prices have eased. That suggests there is some market skepticism about the likelihood or impact of such tariffs, particularly in these commodity sectors. Trump also wants America more involved in making our own drugs. Starting April 2nd, a 25% tariff will be imposed on U.S. pharmaceutical companies operating in Ireland. This was a way people were able to offshore some of their IP and production and escape a lot of the domestic activity that bolsters our economy and our durability in the event that we don't have offshored manufacturing of the drugs that Americans could need. This action by the president could change the nature of the 80,000 Irish jobs, and it could affect Ireland's economy, given that pharmaceutical exports to the U.S. from that small island nation have totaled about 58 billion pounds in 2024. But that shows where the leakage is. That shows what we're missing out on because the policies of the Biden administration have encouraged companies to offshore their production rather than bringing that to the United States where we get the full economic benefit. Public opinion on these tariffs is certainly divided. While some view them as a means to bolster domestic industries, there are some expressing concern about the consumer indexes and potential for economic downturns. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, a very smart guy, said the tariffs are worth it. And you know what? We actually agree with him. It seems to be based on sound economic logic. As these developments unfold, there are expected to be far-reaching implications for international trade regulations and the global economy. All of this is happening as we're getting news of a recent transfer of Tren de Aragua gang members who had come to the United States from Venezuela. This batch of 17 with Tren de Aragua and some MS-13 were just sent to El Salvador, where they'll be spending a good amount of time in Sacat and getting their due process there, rather than in the United States, where under the Biden-Harris administration, you've been paying for the judges and the lawyers and a lot of the challenges in the system that have blocked the true legitimate asylum claims on behalf of those who are here to do Americans harm. Joining us now is the co-chairman of the DOGE Caucus, Texas Congressman Pete Sessions. Congressman Sessions, I want to start with you on the issue of trade. You know a lot about trade. You shepherded through the reauthorization of the XM Bank, something that facilitated a lot of trade in and out of the United States. What's your perspective on the announcements of tariffs that President Trump has indicated will come this week?
Matt, these are very interesting things that the president's doing. As you know, the president deeply believes that we want to make sure that American jobs stay in America, but that we also take jobs back that perhaps have been overseas. And the perspective that we have is one that the president will be making an announcement probably on April 2nd, and we'll learn more about that. But today, I spent time with the USTR office. Larry Calhoun came in and talked to 11 people from across the 17th District of Texas, all with ideas about how to strengthen not just the president's ideas, but to strengthen the resolve for us to have more jobs in the United States. The perspective is from some viewpoints is it could be a wash. It could be a wash from a perspective of there was a company that manufactures a lot of paper products here in this country. They export them to Canada. Canada now, as a result of the discussions with the USTR and the president, are going to put a 25% tariff on American products, which means that the Canadians now will tax a tariff on those items going into Canada, which we have been exporting for. So it's going to cause some bit of change. I think overall, if you look at what's coming to America, the president has announced over $4 trillion worth of new businesses that would be finding America as the home, made in America. So from that perspective, there will be more jobs in the United States.
I'm eager to hear about this important meeting you had with a senior administration official regarding trade. Did the U.S. Trade Representative have to react to concerns that prices might increase temporarily as the full envelope of President Trump's economic and trade agenda come into fruition?
Well, what they did talk about was some of the uncertainties that are related to this. And one of those uncertainties is how other countries are now putting a tariff on our items that flow into their country. A second item was whether they're going to be what I would call a netting out. So you see that it's not unusual for the United States, in particular with steel products, to put what might be, I'll just use an example of $1,000 product, 900 of that would be done with American steel sent to Canada. $100 worth of value may be added to that when it goes to Canada, but it could be taxed back at $1,000, even though the value add from Canada was only $100. These are some of the uncertainties that are happening. Other circumstances which are well known is at the border, Customs and Border Protection, known as CBP, may not be as far along to know what they're supposed to do with these products. And so there are a number of trucks, there are about 1,400 trucks a day that come across the border that are aimed for Central Texas that are virtually at standstill waiting to find out what tariff would be applied to them. There are companies that are not sure what the sell point would be because a tariff would be added. So we're in a little bit of an uncertain time right now. I think this will quickly find itself to where we get to equilibrium and balance, but right now there's uncertainty.
I do want to talk to you about the DOGE Caucus, which you are the co-chairman of. Americans have been encouraged to see the effort that's gone into finding some of the wasteful spending that has persisted for far too long in Washington. Share with us the initiatives that the DOGE Caucus is going to undertake to try to make some of this cost saving permanent.
Matt, these are all very good questions. And by the way, let me be the first to say tonight, you were missed on the floor of the House of Representatives, not only as my friend, but a strong voice for what I call true north and understanding about what would make our country stronger and better. The DOGE Caucus has a responsibility within Congress which is different than the administration. We are working together and partnering off making sure that we're not only talking about government efficiency, but DOGE within the administration actually sees not just the checks or the payment or the money that goes forth, but they have a responsibility to understand the money as it goes out from Treasury. We, on the other hand, here in Congress, have a responsibility to look at the agencies and to make sure they are not only funded properly, but the oversight is happening. As you may know, as the chairman of Government Operations and Federal Workforce for Government Reform and Oversight Committee, I have the responsibility for zeroing in on several factors. Number one, getting federal workers back to work. I think that's still a work in progress because the court system. Secondly, the misdirected payments, and we know there's generally about $400 billion a year that fits under waste, fraud, and abuse or misdirected payments. What we're attempting to do there is to take a page out of the existing structure within the administration, and that is the Pandemic Payment Center. It is a small organization that was established later in the Biden administration after some $400 billion flew out the door. And what it is for is to make sure that we are looking at or running through a process to know what I call a negative file, addresses, emails, people that we know are fraudulent, or the wrong people. And so we are going to begin this process of running Social Security, Veterans Affairs, and other SBA and other agencies directly through this process, which is not something that has existed up until today. Before, they simply looked at things that came out with COVID. Now we're going to extend this to the general government payment system, and we think that it's a real plus to have us working with DOGE, and we would expect that we would have an opportunity to look back in 2 years from now and say, we made a real difference.
It seems like it would be a real force multiplier to have the Oversight Committee there working on some of the agencies intermittently with DOGE and then seeing those reforms really driven into law so you don't get crazy stories like, I don't know, Stacey Abrams' entity getting $2 billion after having only $100 in the bank account. If your committee and if your caucus find instances of graft and people just stealing, will you have any reservations about making criminal referrals?
We have no reservations, and Matt, as you well understand yourself, that because the prior administration intentionally did not put data nor information about people or groups that they were sending money to, it becomes more difficult for us to see or have visibility where they have gone. But we are, as well, the Department of Justice and the FBI, looking at where these monies went, what they did with the money, and certainly we would be following up, not just from a perspective of Congress, but also inspector generals that are well onto this target. The problem
Terrific.
is it was fraud to begin with, and they were not people that should have gotten the money, and it's hard to chase good money when it's gone to a bad person.
Final topic I want to chat about, these deportations of MS-13 and Tren de Aragua gang members to Sacat prison in El Salvador. We got news that just last night there was an additional transport of 17 more of these really terrorists who have been in our country doing harm to our fellow Americans. Judge Bossberg believes he has an injunction to stop these deportations. The administration seems to say this is a national security issue and they're going to continue nonetheless. How do you see it, Congressman?
Well, I do see it the correct way, and that is that there are national security elements behind this. when you look at the way they were brought in without regard for the law, without regard for the rule of law, but now when they're being taken out of the country, all of a sudden these same people want to have a process and rule of law. I say, I'm sorry that they are a national threat. They are a problem. They have proven that they're a problem, and I am glad that the president's doing this, and we welcome the court system. If we have to go higher all the way to the Supreme Court, so be it.
So you think he should just keep doing the deportations as the appeals proceed?
I think that, Matt, I think it's important that they know who they are nabbing, that the reason why they're doing this, and they're actually going after very dangerous people who quite probably came up with a criminal gang. They're all associated with each other. These are not loosely knit people on their own. These are gangs which prey on people primarily who are foreigners that came to our country. And it's a very terrible mess, but it's a real problem for law enforcement as they take these gangs on, perhaps one or two law enforcement officers that run across a gang of 10 or 12, and we've seen lots of evidence of that.
Congressman Pete Sessions of Texas, thank you for your leadership on the Oversight Committee and as co-chairman of the DOGE Caucus. Godspeed, my friend.
Matt, thank you very much. Hope I'll get back on and give you great updates.
Sounds great.